There is a kind of person the world underestimates almost every single day. They're rarely the loudest voice in the room. They don't rush to fill silences. They listen more than they talk. They watch more than they perform. They aren't the ones interrupting, bragging, or fighting to be seen. They sit at the edge of the group, absorbing everything. They notice who talks over whom. They notice who shifts in their chair when certain topics come up. They remember the small things people say and the things they never say at all. This is the quiet personality. Carl Jung would say their energy is turned inward, toward their inner world of thoughts, feelings and meanings, rather than constantly spilling outward into noise and display. For a long time, this person doesn't look like they're winning. They might be overlooked, interrupted, laughed over, mistaken for shy, weak, or unambitious. But if you follow the story far enough, something surprising happens. The quiet personality, the one people underestimated, talked over, and ignored, often ends up winning the most. Not necessarily with the biggest spotlight, but with the deepest peace, the healthiest relationships, the clearest self-respect. The kind of life that actually feels like theirs. Before we go deeper, pause with me for a moment. If you've always been the quiet one, misread, underestimated, but quietly observing everything, and some part of you knows there is more power in you than anyone realizes, type the word quiet in the comments. Just that one word. You don't have to explain yourself. You're simply sending a message to your own soul. I'm not weak. I'm quietly powerful. And if you're new here, take a second to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next time your heart needs words like this. Now, let's talk about why your quiet nature is not a flaw. It's a different strategy, one that takes longer to show results, but in the long run, often wins the most. You weren't too quiet. The world was too noisy. From the beginning, you probably heard some version of the same feedback. Speak up. Why are you so quiet? You need to be more confident. Maybe teachers wrote on your report cards, excellent student, but too quiet in class. Maybe family members teased you at gatherings. Say something. Why are you just sitting there? Inside, you weren't empty. You were full. You had thoughts. You had insights. You saw things others didn't. You just weren't interested in competing for airspace with people who loved the sound of their own voices. Jung would say, your psyche is introverted, not in the pop psychology sense of antisocial, but in the deep sense that your attention naturally turns inward to your own impressions, reflections, and inner meanings. This doesn't mean you dislike people. It means you process them, you watch, you listen, you let experiences sink in. But in a world that equates loudness with confidence and fast speech with intelligence, your slowness, your pauses, your observing nature got misinterpreted as weakness. So for years, you may have tried to fix yourself. You forced yourself into groups where you felt drained. You pushed yourself to talk more than you wanted to. You answered questions faster than felt honest, just so no one could accuse you of being too quiet. And every time you did this against your nature, your inner world felt a little more invaded. You left conversations feeling exhausted. You replayed what you said, wondering if you sounded stupid. You missed your own company the way some people miss a person. But you thought, this is what it takes to succeed. I guess I just have to be louder. What no one told you is this. You were not designed to win at the game of constant noise. Your power would never come from out-shouting others. It would come later, from something much deeper. Quiet doesn't mean you're not thinking. It means you're thinking more. When a quiet person is silent, people often assume nothing is happening. But still, water is rarely empty. In social situations, other people rush into the silence with words. You rush into the silence with awareness. While they talk, you're noticing. You see the person making jokes to hide their insecurity. You see the way someone's eyes cloud over when a certain topic appears. You feel tension between two people who say, "We're fine." You hear what's said, but you also hear what is not said. You notice inconsistencies. They say they're happy in their job, but their shoulders drop when they talk about it. They say they're over someone, but their entire energy changes when that name is mentioned. You might not comment out loud, but your inner world is full of these impressions. Jung believed the introverted, intuitive personality has a special relationship with the unconscious, the hidden layer of motives, fears, and patterns beneath everyday life. You don't just take things at face value. You absorb them, turn them over in your mind, and connect them to a larger picture. This means, yes, you sometimes take longer to respond. You're not just answering for the sake of noise. You're feeling for the truth. In a culture that celebrates quick takes and hot opinions, this can make you feel slow. But later in life, in relationships, in work, in decision-making, your ability to pause and process becomes a superpower. You're less likely to make reckless choices. You're less likely to explode and say things you can't take back. You're more likely to see the long-term consequences of what everyone else treats as a short-term thrill. Quiet today, wise tomorrow. Let's pause here for a breath. If you've ever gone home from a conversation, remembered every detail, and realized you saw more than anyone else in the room, just know that's not overthinking. That's one of your advantages. If this is resonating with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next time your soul needs this kind of reminder. Now, let's keep going. The quiet personality builds slowly but deeply. Because you are not constantly externalizing your energy, you have more of it available for inner construction. While others are chasing constant stimulation, you can sit with yourself. You read, you think, you journal, you imagine, you replay experiences to understand them better. Your inner life becomes rich. Jung would say you're cultivating a strong relationship with your own self, that deep, organizing center that is more than your roles, masks, or current circumstances. This means you know what drains you and what nourishes you. Feel the difference between real connection and performance. Are aware when you're betraying yourself even if you don't change it right away. You may not have flashy milestones early, you might not be the one constantly posting achievements, but underground, roots are forming. Deep roots don't impress anybody at first. You can't photograph them, you can't show them off. But later, when storms come, when life shakes, when others collapse under pressure, those with deep roots remain. This is one of the ways the quiet personality wins, not by rising quickly, but by collapsing less. Your quietness protects you from certain kinds of damage. There are dangers loud personalities rush into that you instinctively avoid. You don't overshare with everyone. You don't tell your secrets to people you've just met. You don't put your whole heart on the table for someone who hasn't earned it. Sometimes you've judged yourself for this. Why can't I be more open? Why can't I just let people in? Why do I always hold back? But think of how many disasters you have quietly sidestepped because of that natural caution. You didn't jump into every friendship. You waited, watched, saw how they treated other people. You noticed how they spoke about their exes, their friends, their co-workers. You saw patterns, and even if you couldn't articulate it, something in you said, I need to be careful here. That something is intuition, one of Jung's key functions of the psyche. For the quiet, reflective personality, intuition is often highly developed. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It whispers, slow down. Pay attention. Something is off. When you listen, you avoid people and paths that would have hurt you much more deeply later. You may have fewer connections than others, but the ones you do have tend to be more honest. This is not an accident. It's the long-term result of your quiet, careful selection. The quiet personality is often underestimated, and that's an advantage. In a world that overvalues loudness, you become easy to misread. At work, people might assume you're not ambitious because you're not constantly boasting. In groups, people might assume you don't have much to say because you're not fighting to dominate the conversation. In relationships, people might misinterpret your silence as weakness and think they can take you for granted. They don't realize you're simply observing. They don't realize that by the time you speak, you've already seen patterns, noticed inconsistencies, measured the gap between words and actions. Jung would say people project their own assumptions onto you, their own insecurities, their own ideas about what quiet means. Being underestimated can hurt your ego. It can make you feel invisible. But it also gives you something powerful. Room. Room to grow without pressure. Room to experiment without everyone's eyes on you. Room to become more than they expect, without having to constantly defend your evolution. You're not under the same exhausting spotlight as the ones who always need to be seen. You can let your work, your decisions, your presence speak for you little by little over time. And when your results finally appear, they feel like they came out of nowhere to everyone else. You know they were years in the making. The quiet personality wins in relationships by refusing to play shallow games. You may not be great at flirting loudly, at performing an easygoing persona, at pretending you're fine with casual when your soul craves depth. You might even feel at a disadvantage when it comes to dating or friendship in a culture that loves quick chemistry and instant connection. But here's what actually happens. Because you are quiet, you are also less willing to tolerate noise. You don't enjoy conversations that are all performance and no substance. You can't pretend you're okay being half seen. You get drained by people who love chaos more than truth. So you let certain connections die out. You don't chase as much. You don't beg as much. You don't force yourself into spaces where your nervous system shuts down. At first, this leaves you lonely. You look around and feel, why does everyone else have a group, a person, a scene? Why do I feel like I'm always somewhere on the outside? Jung would say you are refusing at a soul level to build a life out of what doesn't really match you. Later in life, this pays off. When you do find your people, they tend to be the ones who ask real questions, the ones who don't need you to perform, the ones who value your thoughts, not just your availability. You might have a smaller circle than most, but the quality is higher. That's another way the quiet personality wins, not by having the most people around them, but by having relationships that are actually safe, nourishing, and mutual. The quiet personality carries a different kind of power. Most people think of power as volume, status, command, control. But Jung also spoke about a subtler power, the power of presence, authenticity, and alignment between inner and outer life. Quiet people grow into this kind of power without even realizing it. You become the person in the room who doesn't need to shout to be felt. People find themselves telling you things they've never told anyone. They feel calmer around you because you're not adding to the noise. You're not trying to dominate, just to understand. You become the steady friend when others panic, the grounded voice when everyone else is spiraling, the one who can sit with uncomfortable truths without immediately trying to fix or deny them. When life gets hard, and it always does, eventually, this is the kind of presence people seek out. The loud, performative personalities might get a lot of attention when things are going well. But in times of crisis, people reach for quiet clarity, and you have it, not because you memorized answers, but because you've spent years in conversation with yourself, with your own fears, wounds, and questions. Your power isn't in being louder, it's in being more rooted. Midway check-in. If you've ever felt small in loud rooms, but deep down you know that your strength is in your steadiness, your insight, your presence, just breathe for a moment. You do not have to become someone else to win. If this is speaking to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next time your soul needs this kind of reminder. Now, let's talk about what winning really means for a quiet personality. For the quiet personality, winning looks different. You were never meant to win at the game of who talks the most, who posts the most, who gets the most validation. Your win looks quieter, but deeper. Winning for you looks like waking up and realizing you're not at war with your own nature anymore, having a small number of relationships where you are fully yourself, doing work in any form that doesn't choke your soul, moving through the world with a nervous system that isn't constantly fried, being able to sit alone with yourself without feeling like you're in bad company. That may not get you a viral moment, but it will give you something far more valuable, a life that is actually livable. Jung would say the true goal is individuation, becoming the person you were meant to be, not the person others pressured you to become. For the quiet personality, this means you stop apologizing for needing space. You stop forcing yourself into overexposure. You create a life that respects your sensitivity instead of constantly violating it. And over time, the world begins to respond. Opportunities arise that fit how you actually work. People appear who appreciate your depth. Your insights find the right channels. Through writing, creating, mentoring, leading, parenting, healing, or simply living in a way that makes others exhale, you end up winning because you quietly refused, over and over, to abandon yourself completely. You don't peak early, you ripen. Some personalities shine very brightly, very early, but often they burn out just as fast. The quiet personality tends to move differently. You might stumble through your 20s and 30s feeling like everyone else is ahead. They have clearer titles, bigger social circles, more obvious markers of success. You feel like you're still figuring it out, still rearranging your inner furniture, still searching for where you fit. But as years pass, something happens. The loud ones who built everything on speed and image start to feel tired. Their unhealed wounds catch up with them. Their lives might look impressive but feel hollow. You, on the other hand, have been in ongoing dialogue with your own depths. You've met your sadness. You've met your loneliness. You've met your anger and your sensitivity. You've made friends with your own shadow instead of pretending it doesn't exist. So as time goes on, you don't get harder, you get clearer. Your edges soften, not because you're weak, but because you're not constantly defending a fake persona. You start to look like someone who knows who they are and no longer needs to shout about it. That is ripening. Jung often wrote that the second half of life, for those who engage with it consciously, is when real depth emerges. For the quiet personality, this is when your gifts really bloom. You become the kind of person whose presence people remember, not because you were the loudest, but because something about you felt real. If you're still listening, this is for you. You might still be the quiet one in loud rooms. You might still get talked over or underestimated. You might still go home from social situations and wonder, should I have said more? But underneath all of that, something else is true. Your quiet is not emptiness. It is concentration. You're not less than the loud ones. You are simply playing a different game on a different timeline with different stakes. You are building a life you can actually survive, a soul you can actually respect, relationships you can actually trust. In the long run, that is what winning looks like. If some part of you knows, I may be quiet, but I am not weak. I am slowly, quietly building something real. Type the word quiet in the comments if you haven't already. Just that one word, so your future self can scroll back one day and see the moment you stopped seeing your quiet nature as a curse and started seeing it as your strategy. And if this spoke to your heart, take a moment to support this space. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next time your soul needs a message like this. And when you're about to sleep tonight, don't just scroll away. The playlist is at the end of this video. It will pop up on the end screen. Hit play on that playlist and let it run in the background as you drift off. Your body will rest, but your subconscious will keep listening, keep healing, keep choosing you. Save the playlist, fall asleep with it, and let these messages sink from your mind into your soul. Until one day you look around at the life you've quietly built and realize you didn't have to become loud to win. You won by becoming deeply, steadily, unapologetically yourself.